It's Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills. And today we're talking with guest expert Dr. Kim Case, who will help us figure out what to do when you are part of a marginalized group trying to make a greater impact, but your own community is imploding. How does that happen? How can we minimize the chance of it happening? It's perfect for season 5's focus on making a greater impact. On this show, we discuss how to develop the nuanced hard skills, meaning the most challenging soft skills needed to make a real impact through your leadership. I'm a leadership consulting and coaching psychologist, a group and team facilitator, an associate professor, Psychology Today columnist, author of The Millennial's Guide to Workplace Politics, and had my own leadership career before transitioning to helping teams and high-achieving women navigate their leadership complexities. And before I introduce you to our special guest, I wanted to announce that for the next 2 weeks, we have opened up a new 10-week leadership accelerator called FUEL. Yes, we have to have an acronym, of course, which stands for Focused, Unstoppable, Empowered Leadership. It's made for high-performing, high-achiever misfits who have a hard time with pacing and overdoing things and standing out maybe in ways they don't want to right now, but with a little bit more intention and strategy, they will stand out in all the right ways to their next leadership role, even if they haven't identified what that role is yet. Kim, is that resonating for you?
All right. I'm sorry. Did you write that like Kim Case needs this? Give me a break. I feel triggered.
Now, we have only 5 slots open. You can learn more and enroll by September 19th by going to gotowerscope.com, clicking on Leadership Community Programs, and then FUEL. We start September 23rd and would love to have you part of it. Okay, with no further ado, I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Kim Case. Kim is a social psychologist and tenured professor of psychology, as well as an affiliate professor of gender, sexuality, and women's studies at Virginia Commonwealth University, where she examines how social justice academics and underrepresented scholars contribute to the intentional creation of inclusive spaces within workplace and educational settings. Currently, she's researching the systemic impact of workplace cultural mismatch on how social justice academics navigate job demands with particular attention to health, performance, and retention outcomes. She is also a podcast host, the podcast called Enough Y'all Podcast, love the name, and provides consulting on support for social justice academics, tackling topics such as job crafting, values alignment, invisible labor, self-worth, imposter feelings, and toxic people. On the fun side, Dr. Case can be described as a karaoke addict, a working class academic, an Appalachian clogger, a crocheter, a kitty mama, and aspiring student of Spanish. Welcome on the show, Kim.
Well, thank you so much. We like to have a little fun, not be so serious all the time.
Absolutely. And your world, it can be fairly serious, and this topic can be fairly serious. So we definitely like to balance that out. Now, you wrote this super interesting paper. I'm obsessed with it. Okay. It's called, actually, it's not a paper, it's a chapter in a book. So I'd love to hear about the book. The chapter itself is called Unpacking Toxic Social Justice Cannibalism. The call is calling from inside the house.
Yeah. Anybody love 80s horror movies by any chance?
My daughter loves them. What led you to write on this topic? What's the book itself about? Why this topic right now?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a Mira fangirl, so this is a huge moment. For anybody who does watch, the Zoom background is the book from the book that's going to be coming out, but it's just in production at Rutledge right now, so it might be like a year. And I will give a shout out to my co-editor, Leah Warner at Ramapo College of New Jersey. And the book's title, I'll just say that and we'll get into the meat, but the book will be called Creating a Faculty Activism Commons for Social Justice, which means like a shared space to talk about faculty activism. Subtitle, gotta have one of those, Finding Hope in the Messy Truth. And that's really what we wanted to be the main title of the book, because it is a mess. It's a mess. But I'll say the chapter in particular being about social justice spaces and when those might present challenges in and of themselves, like, for example, infighting and things like that, is really relevant beyond like a faculty activism role. It'd be any sort of social justice community, really. Or if you're trying to do equity work in healthcare, or if you're trying to do advance diversity in leadership within your corporation, institution, governmental, nonprofit, whatever it might be. So in terms of the topic, I think it's broader than that. What led me to write on the topic? Okay, so
Mhm.
either, there's like what I watched happening with my peers and people that I knew, admired, worked with, but also then later coached or consulted with. It would probably be more accurate to say. And there's my personal experiences. So, being sort of a career coach and peer supporter of these social justice academics specifically, but like I said, the context I think where it applies is broader, was about 14 years of me watching like painful experiences of them going through like shock and confusion and being disoriented and feeling alone and then like anxious and burning out and talking about leaving whatever space it may be, a department, an entire institution, leave academia altogether, or withdraw like from social justice movements they were part of. And when I say that, I really do mean it broadly. Like it could be trying to work on recruiting more students of color into their undergrad program, or it could be, trying to get more first generation services on their campus, or it could be, trying to put together more resources for underrepresented faculty and staff. It could be change of policy, lots of different things fall into this. But as people are sort of having these experiences and they're deciding that it's untenable for their mental health, for their physical health, and so we're losing people, and that's of concern to me. So I realized that no one seems to be really writing about it or naming it. It may be happening in little pockets, but like within the literature, there wasn't really naming. There's some research and writing on academic bullying, but that's about as close as it gets because that's really not what we're talking about specifically. We're talking about like any group that is trying to make progress on an issue, and what happens when they turn on each other, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I resonated a lot because I never had a word for it, but looking back, um, I had experienced several situations like this
Mm-hmm.
where I was part of a community. And this, like you said, it doesn't have to be within the academic world. It
Right.
happens well beyond those borders. I am kind of a serial community membership, person. I'm part of lots of groups, and for the longest time, I was hesitant to start my own community because of my own experiences. I was so afraid of causing harm and damage because of the experiences that I had in other communities that had good intention, but still blew up, and these were like communities set up to support women in entrepreneurship, for example,
That's right.
and watching it implode and how awful that was. And even me trying to contribute um, within like DEI committees as part of a larger community, and feeling like I didn't always have the support, and I was experiencing pylons and attacks and completely unnecessary. And when you think about just like community itself, the word community, we join it because we're looking for connection and we're looking for belonging. So
And the
if you don't
unity
get
word is
that,
inside the word.
that's
Unity.
right. That's right. So if you don't experience that, think about the trauma, the damage that it has. And you described it really well, that like the trauma, the impact, the damage that it has is people leaving
Yeah.
something that like could be of good or could have been.
That's why I think it needs to be taken seriously because
Yeah.
not only do people leave maybe that space where that's happening, but then they might not start up some cool thing later because you just said you were hesitant to do your really awesome work. And then we wouldn't have that in the world contributing to helping people move along through less harm, more effectively, realizing their gifts that they want to bring, right? Like we would be robbed of people doing untold amount of things that haven't been imagined yet because they've gone through something like this.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to be the case. I mean, it is the case, but I'd like to reduce it. And I'd also like to bring this to light a little bit more because, when we don't have a name for something, we don't know how to analyze it, or
Yeah.
or it could give us more of a space to analyze it or think, could it have been that thing that has a label now? Or maybe it's not that, but now I have words for it and other people can sort of understand what I mean if I use this phrase. Of course, that would take a while maybe to get it out there, but I had
Yeah.
my first encounter in my professional role life, right? Like in doctoral, when I was a doctoral program, and a woman I worked with for like 2 years on anti-racism work, a white woman. We were working on white women and anti-racism specifically. Showed up to one of our discussion groups one day and just laid into me, yelling at me, asking me questions but not letting me answer, interrupting me, talking over me, assassinating my character, calling my integrity into question. And these were all things that I never knew she even had on her mind. Like, we'd never had any encounter where she asked me a question about it, offered a different perspective of how to proceed, about how we put our group together, right? It just sort of blew up out of nowhere as far as I knew. And it wasn't a growth response. It wasn't a response of like, well, maybe Kim needs to think about this differently and I have another perspective. It was assassinate character,
Mm.
blow up the group, cause a scene, humiliate me in public, and then storm out. So I didn't have any words for any of this, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
the stun of that moment has still stuck with me. Like, I can feel it in my bones right now talking about it.
Yeah.
And so from there, I wrote about a little bit in the chapter how I really didn't learn from that. I didn't learn what it was. And then some other experiences later on kind of brought that back. But yeah, so I figured we need to be talking about this a little bit
Yeah,
more.
absolutely. And often I feel like people are more empowered to look for it, to identify it, and then to know what to do with it once there is kind of some term. So let's start there. Like, what is um, in what situations is this more likely to happen? What does it look like? What
Mhm.
do people look for?
Yeah, I feel like really anywhere humans are, but since I'm being more specific,
Yeah.
in this particular phrasing and labeling, we're trying to look at how is it that spaces where people are trying to advance, I'll just include diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice, anything under that umbrella, small or statewide or however big you want to go, right? But it could just be like your corner, and that's fine. Um, there will be, if there's more than one human, there may be moments when they don't necessarily agree on how to approach something, or you know the right terminology to use, or where to focus the energy, who should do what, who should be a leader, who should be in charge of this and that and the other thing. um, and I think that because these, I'm going to just call them social justice spaces, because social justice spaces are made of, of people who, in other realms of their life, whether it's their workplace or another space in their workplace, like maybe they are on a DEI committee, or they're in a department that maybe is an ethnic studies or women's studies, or more focused on social justice issues in that way. Other spaces in that workplace maybe don't value that as much, and they are invalidated, delegitimized, rendered invisible for all the extra labor they're doing, actually discriminated against actively, experience constant microaggressions, right? So a lot of times I think that what happens is all of that frustration and very valid feeling, um, anger, and that people are sort of taking from you and not seeing you, and those kinds of experiences. Then when we come into these social justice spaces, it may be the only space people feel like they can speak up,
Mm,
actually, share an alternative perspective, but it's not necessarily done always in the way that invites uh, people to be heard, or to have the other person listen, or for it to be
mhm.
effective if you want behavior change in another human or another set of humans, or if you want to influence maybe a direction of a group, which would require other humans to be on board with what you're suggesting, right? All of that's behavior change. But I think a lot of things blow up because people are so frustrated from other spaces in their lives. So it's really, I think, a microcosm example of how systemic oppression treats people. And
Mm,
then ironically and sadly, I think we, members of the community, sometimes can enact that on each other in the under the guise of wanting to do the social justice. We can tear each other apart.
yeah, yeah.
And it's
Let's
almost
hold
like
on.
permission if you say it's because I'm doing it because I care about the cause and I'm telling you how horrible
Yeah.
you are.
Right, right. Let's hold on to that for just a second because I
Sure.
really want to dig into that. And we're reaching an ad break, so we're going to have people hold until we get back from the ad break. You are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to join our online audience and ask questions that we can answer in real time on LinkedIn or YouTube at talkradio.nyc, please do so. We will answer. We will be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case. And we are talking about this social justice cannibalism, what it looks like, how to minimize it. And you wrote something I want to read in your chapter that I really want to unpack here. So you wrote, academic socialization pushes us to pretend social justice cannibalism does not happen. Keep it in the family, absorb the pain, push forward as if we're all united, and never reveal discontent within our communities. We encourage each other to decenter ourselves or decenter the self to such an extreme that we lose the ability to identify our own mistreatment. And when you were describing what it looks like for somebody from a marginalized and background who probably already has experienced, traumatic experiences within an organizational structure, and coming back to the community, and that it might be, in my words, the only safe space to just be authentic, be true, be angry, all of that. I started thinking of that sort of relationship to family, right? When people come home and they like let everything out and you're like, why are you taking it out on me? Right. And it's the only safe space to do so. And when you wrote this, that's what I was starting to, actually you wrote like, keep it in the family, absorb the pain, push forward. So what is this socialization about? And how do we end up accepting mistreatment amongst ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. And, I know that you are a really good and strong proponent of reminding us of complexity. And I really appreciate that about you. Because I think what happens too is oversimplification as part of this process. For example, and I'll come back to that, fundamental attribution error is something for people to keep in mind as a social psychologist that have to pump that up, because we are very much, in this culture in particular, trained to notice I see Mira, I see Mira do a behavior. That's because Mira, I don't like that behavior, and Mira's a bad person. So
Right.
the connection between I didn't like the behavior of yours and something's wrong with you is fundamental attribution error. We are not necessarily looking at the context and how the social forces and how so many intersecting systems of oppression also and privilege are at play. And it's not necessarily just that individual, but part of that socialization, there's sort of the societal socialization, and then I'll come back to that in a second, but the academic socialization process, training doctoral students and faculty, and then what goes on until you're retired, is that this kind of arguing remains invisible. I think also in the faculty consciousness, I don't think we realize it's happening. And the social justice piece of it is that you're always supposed to be united. So when I was in a women's studies program at another university, it was very much like, we don't talk about this outside of this room because we don't want to give the institution a reason to dismantle us or critique us further or pull resources, which we didn't even have resources. Where were they going to pull them? But it's just this, there's a fear-based, probably pretty valid fear-based response, which is we're under threat all the time. So we can't, everyone needs to make sure that we are united when we go outside of here. So, and even within the circle, talking to another person that witnessed maybe a more toxic kind of behavior probably wouldn't go well, because the idea is we don't acknowledge that, because we're all just trying to do our best. And that's very true, right? And I think that the idea is if you speak up about that, you speaking up about it is the problem, but not the person's behavior is the problem, which is interesting, right? It makes me think about things like talking about race, talking about sexual assault, talking about, intimate partner violence, or bringing up any system of oppression. People get more upset with the fact that you're naming it than how do we address the actual behavior that's happening. Because if we acknowledge that you're bringing it up, then we have to do something about it too, right?
Yeah.
So the other piece would be social identity-based socialization, right? So gender socialization for many communities of color, within the US context at least, and also working class background, I would say lower to even lower middle income backgrounds. And there may be other groups. I would say someone who might be an immigrant or someone who speaks with an accent that feels like maybe the message from society is you should be quiet. And it's, so there's some gender implications there for me, like, and working class implications that, what I'm experiencing isn't worthy of voice necessarily. And so, I think within social justice circles, any focus on the self is considered selfish, when a focus on the self could be protecting your mental health, and that shouldn't be considered selfish. So we go a little too far with some of the messages, I think, and no one says, let us abuse you, be quiet. But these things happen, and then it's like there's no bystander to say, hey, we shouldn't treat that person that way. It just all sort of becomes part of the culture. And I think that it'd be really nice if we could be clear that allowing yourself to be harmed actually does hurt the overall social justice goals. And it's been sort of flipped into this myth that you should allow yourself to be harmed, and that is good for social justice to continue.
That is very complex. Very. So for those of you who may have sort of like missed some of these social psychology constructs, fundamental attribution error. So she described this. This is when we might give ourselves grace. If we make a mistake, it's because of contextual issues and, understandable. But if somebody else makes a mistake, the same mistake, we don't give them as much grace. We might judge them for their character and make it more globally about their personality, or they're just too, or whatever it is. The other, you mentioned socialization, like how we grow up, what we're learning about our identity, the messages that we're told about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And then I might add one more to that, when you were describing like bringing in all of this sort of like pent up upsetness, right, into a community. Projection is another concept where the things that we feel so negatively about, we don't want to feel anymore, so we put it on others so they can hold it. And again, none of this is healthy for anybody, right? Like we all suffer. And as we're talking about this, one of the things I'm curious about, just this morning, I was listening to Adam Grant's new Rethinking podcast.
Right.
And he was interviewing Danielle Allen, a political scientist. And she was talking about the challenge of having important discourse on college campuses and how difficult it is because, and this is sort of like what she was explaining, we have a culture of accusation versus a culture of cooperation. And then he mentioned the additional problem of courtroom reasoning, so having to debate and win, versus Socratic questioning, which is learning and openness and curiosity. I'm curious if that's kind of yet another layer that you see playing in.
I do. I think the projection piece fits well with, it's not just projection onto anyone else, it's projection onto other people who we either feel similar power to or more power than, right? Back to where is it safe in your job to act out like this? And, and the whole idea, like if you, get pulled over a police officer, you don't scream at that person, but you go home and scream at someone, like you were kind of mentioning earlier. And I think that, what was the thing? What was the Adam? Remind me, what was the?
Oh, he mentioned the problem of courtroom reasoning.
Oh, goodness. Be curious, not judgmental is not something we default to, right? And I think definitely with this concept of social justice, cannibalism, many of these moments are knee-jerk kind of attacks at people. And if in those moments people could take a step back, I mean, have I always done a good job of giving feedback? No. So in those moments, if I had taken a step back and said, okay, why am I feeling like this needs to be right this second? Maybe I didn't like the terminology that person used. Maybe they needed a little update. How do I think about how they might hear that well? I understand maybe no one's ever told them, right? Think about the context. What is it about the social context that I am not realizing? And it's not that this person doesn't want to update their language. It's that maybe they haven't heard yet that this is maybe this new way to talk about this. And, I was in a committee meeting once where someone used what I would consider a pretty outdated slur, and had to think through, well, how am I going to approach that? Am I going to publicly call this person out in the middle of a meeting? Might not be the best route, right? And so if we could think more like, how can I ask the person questions like, hey, have you heard about this other thing that people are saying? Ask curious questions versus you are in trouble. You are a bad person. You have harmed everyone. You should know better. A lot of accusatory character attacks. You clearly don't care about this group of people because of these things you said. The question is, and we can come to it later, obviously, is do you want to be effective? Do you want to be effective in communicating with this person? Do you want to be effective in social justice, whatever issue is you're working on, like moving that along? Then the question of how we approach those moments is not the same. But the answer to that is not the same.
Yeah, you're right. I am reflecting on how part of this is just how quick to judge and to blame we all are. And when we're hurt because of other reasons, we're probably more quick to judge and blame because we don't want any more hurt. But you're right that like, will we come off as effective in changing that paradigm, changing the outcome that we don't want to see anymore if we're going to do that? And so there's also, when we come back, from this next ad break, I also want to sort of think about that, like in motivational interviewing, there's a concept called the writing reflex, a problem we have with needing to be right and correcting other people as like, it feels so good. We just,
I mean, it has an ego boost to it.
There is, but by correcting and writing people, there is a lot of one-upping yourself and one-downing somebody else. And so that takes away from, again, the entire point of community connection, relationship, that kind of thing. So I'm going to stop right there before we get to the ad break. We'll return You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case. So we were starting to talk about the writing reflex, and we've had a lot of like interesting back and forth behind the scenes chat conversations that I want to bring forward for the audience. And so let's walk backward a little bit and describe what qualifies as this sort of toxic social justice cannibalism. And then we can sort of move forward through like, how do we end up in this place and where we see it in different spaces and why?
Yeah, fair. I mean, writing this chapter was not easy. So Hard Skills Fits. My beautiful, wonderful, brilliant co-editor kept saying to me, right, but could it just be feedback? And so I was like, right. So how do we make sure we're looking at like, what is constructive feedback? What do those characteristics look like? And what is something that might be called toxic? Toxic approach to feedback, which I would call this, cannibalism piece. And so what I came to, and I don't have the whole list here, but kind of some categories, some things to ask yourself, because this is not permission to be like, no feedback is ever valid. I never do anything wrong. I never need to grow. I don't listen to people anymore. I could just say, Kim said it's cannibalism. No. So you really have to walk through some steps and say, is someone, for example, is someone attacking my character? Is someone attacking my social identity or intersectional identities? Those things should be off the table, right? If you want to talk to someone about what behavior is happening, that's not the same as attacking their character, integrity, their soul, their values, how they even, exist as a human being through their own identities. That should be a sign that maybe you're talking about cannibalism stuff. Okay, 3 major categories beyond that. Is it self-serving? Is someone coming to you and it's a self-serving kind of moment for them? The person that's giving you this feedback, whether it's toxic or not. Are they engaging in woke Olympics? Are they doing a competition with you? I know better. I'm more of an ally than you. I'm more of a social justice, effective, community member, nonprofit member than you. I do anti-racism the right way. You do it the wrong way. Are they attacking your credentials and saying their credentials are the only ones that can be correct, right? So that fits with your writing kind of idea. Some of this stuff can be personality sometimes, but I would just say that we all have personality characteristics that maybe need to be tweaked, right? Another big piece, and maybe it should be the first one, is control. So if someone comes to you and says, unless you do X, you are bad and wrong and you are a horrible social justice advocate. Unless you do this thing that I'm telling you, you must do, take this action right now. And I've had this happen to me. You are now no longer part of the crew that is social justice-y. So ultimatums are control, right? And that's power moves. That's not an invitation to reflect. You can tell the difference between those two things. If there's a tone of my way or the highway, it kind of fits back with being right or wrong, right? Their perspective is the only way to justice, or their not suggested but demanded path that the next steps, like maybe an organization takes or that kind of thing, is the only way, then that's a sign. And I would say also control can happen via gaslighting and sort of rewriting facts. So if you start to see those kinds of things. The last little piece categorically would be if they're avoiding complexity. I know you're going to love this one, Mira. So oversimplification, lacking nuance or recognition of human complexity, lacking knowledge that like there are social forces at work and systems at work, and that they're leaning into fundamental attribution error and unable to hear feedback that it's not maybe just the individual. And also within avoiding complexity, it would be like dichotomous framing or all or nothing language. So those are kind of some things to look for, and I'll give some resources later so people don't have to take all these notes.
Thanks. Yeah, those are fantastic. Yeah, and I think with that list, a lot of what we talked about fits under there, like the quick to judge and blame, or need to prove yourself as right, the righting reflex. What do you think about the cancel culture?
Well, I was just earlier talking about all these pieces of our current moment that maybe exacerbate this too. Not that this is a new phenomenon. I don't think it is. I think it's been going on way before, white women's right to vote. And on through all the different movements. But, the court culture, I think cancel culture it's had a big, huge rise. I don't know if it's moments past, but I think it has rewritten a little bit about our assumptions about how we engage with people who maybe did do something that needs to be thought through and improved upon in a really, supportive way. And the reflex is burn their life down, or burn down their reputation in their career, or and there's different gradients of what I'm talking about here, obviously. I mean, if you're a sexual predator at your job, I'm going to put that in a different category. But cancel culture based on like, maybe you just have a different view of how to proceed, or, you have a different opinion about something. So that, I think, gives people more permission in their brain to focus on attack of the individual as well. But again, I don't think this is the new thing. So it's not just because of cancel culture.
Yeah, what comes up for me is then how do communities of social justice advocates who have different perspectives on how to proceed with a challenging social justice issue that they're passionate about, if they disagree, right, about the how, or even the language that they place on it, or the level of intensity they focus on it, whatever, how can they both have a productive, healthy conversation about it, give each other feedback when they're concerned, and stay aligned with the focus of their cause at the same time? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say hire you as a consultant.
What's the answer, Kim?
That's the answer. The answer is hire Mira Ronku to come work with your team. Been there, and it was great. Well, I mean, I feel like so some of the things I talk about in the chapter are really individual based. Like, what if you're someone who wants to give someone feedback? And how do you then plan that in a way? The word plan is important here, because again, a lot of this stuff is knee jerk.
Yeah.
And I have been very guilty of like responding too quickly in the past, which I also write about in the chapter. But I think this individual level advice is true at the team level, the group level, the collective that's working on getting more people out to vote level, whatever it might be. And it's to think through how you're going to do something in a supportive and compassionate way and sort of continually question your own assumptions and like judgmental things that are starting to creep up. You know, you could even have moments where you sit down and say, okay, how are we approaching this? Are we using fundamental attribution error? Are we, have we gotten everybody's ideas out? Do people feel safe to even share their ideas? You know, is there a way that you can look at that? You know, how do we prioritize? Actually, let's start with this. Or do we all even have the same goal?
Mhm.
A lot of times that's the first assumption, is that everybody in the room has the same goal.
Yeah.
And they maybe came in there with 4 different kinds of goals among the 7 people that showed up. But there's an assumption everyone has the same goal, that whatever the leader in the room is. So starting with that, and then constantly, very, very intentionally, and I would say almost tangibly coming back to what the agreed upon goal is. If the agreed upon goal is get rides for people to go vote, that's it. Then every single thing we discuss should be like, how does it fit with that? Are we prioritizing that? How does it fit with that? And it should also be that everyone's asking themselves, when I make a suggestion, is it because I'm trying to put me forward, or I'm trying to put that goal forward? You know, is it my ego trying to talk? Sometimes we don't know because we're not asking ourselves those questions in advance. I can pause to see if you have anything you're thinking about.
Yeah. Well, a billion questions.
Please.
The first thing that comes to mind is, and let me place it in the context of myself, right? I started out by saying, because of my bad experiences with this, I fear creating a community where the same thing happens again, even despite my best efforts. Right. And so, yes, I've put in a lot of mechanisms to avoid this, but the big question is, how would I know? Like, the answers to your questions, right, are a lot of introspection.
Yes.
Is my ego involved here? Is this about me trying to prove myself? Is this about me trying to gain some power in this situation?
Right.
The power question especially intrigues me. How might I be able to assess whether I'm saying I'm aligned with the shared goal?
Yeah.
But in fact, there's some additional ulterior personal motive.
Well, and it may be fine, actually. If it's not like it's bad, if, you know, you're like, okay, my suggestion is we go to these neighborhoods that we know historically in elections, I'm still in the same example, didn't have as much of a turnout. I think that would be a great idea because maybe those people need rides, or maybe we can find out there's another reason, or, you know, maybe we find another reason it's not our goal, but we know the organization working on that goal, that they maybe would meet those people's needs. And it advances maybe your interest in being a person who gets known for election turnouts. I don't know, maybe you're going to have a podcast on that. That's not a problem to me. Actually, I think that's great alignment. But if you're suggesting, well, I think what we should do is do a fundraiser and donate our fundraising money to a organization that looks at voter fraud, because maybe that's what you want to get known for. I don't know. Then people be like, well, that's not the goal that we're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
And then you just try to bully them into doing it.
Right.
It might align with the goal that you have about yourself, but it's not what the stated upon collective goal is, right? So, right. Can everyone do this well? Not necessarily. I think I think groups can put into place, though, sort of practices for how will you call someone in. I know we don't say call out anymore, which I'm fine with call out, but how do we do that in a constructive, supportive, compassionate, can we do that? Can we have some grace for people? I'm not even a person that uses the word grace, but can we have some grace for people and for ourselves? Like, everybody's really just doing the best they can, to be honest.
Yeah.
And even people who we experience as really toxic, they're also doing the best that they can. Can you believe that? If they could do better, they would, I think. I often don't have a lot of compassion for people who act like that, but I can't say that they know better. because they're still doing it.
Right.
So,
So let's hold on to that. I would love to explore in this next final segment practices for calling people in a compassionate, supportive, empowered way. So you are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case, and we will be right back in just a moment. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Kim Case. Kim, I was starting to think about practices of calling people in a compassionate, supportive, and empowered way. And I want to hold off on that question for just a moment, because I want to first go to what if I'm in that situation, right? And I've been the target of this sort of toxic cannibalism that you have described. Or maybe I'm a witness and I'm watching it and it's terrifying and I'm like frozen, right? How would we respond in an ideal situation?
yeah, I think this is where people get stuck.
Yeah.
Because there is often a freezing of the person that's experiencing it and anybody else who may be witnessing. It may also be happening in private, but I think I have made some mistakes in this realm in the past of responding too quickly. And I just want to point out to people that taking the time you need would probably be the first thing. If it's in person or on Zoom, I think separation is the first thing.
Yes.
And not responding.
Yeah.
Now, there may be people who quick on their feet and have it all lined up. That it's not me. And it's not most people, I don't think. So
yeah, although I will say that I'm quick on my feet and I too have responded too quickly, and I have often wished, despite the fact that I can respond, I still should wait.
Yeah, I feel like I don't necessarily, there are some I regret. The ones I regret are people who I don't think deserved a response at all. And I gave them my energy and life force and worried and precipitated and figured out the email to send back and why. This is like a stranger attacking me for no reason. So taking the time you need gives you time to think about, like, what am I actually doing? What are my motivations? So I have some advice, which is, so, and by the way, working class background wise, taking a beat, not my strength, but working on it. So if basically we need to get back control from the amygdala. Okay, so fear center is boom, 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 boom. Fear that you're going to be like, not considered a real scholar, not considered a legitimate DEI person, not considered a legitimate human resources worker, whatever it is, or, community activist. So we got to get ourselves away from fight or flight everything in your body is firing that is not about your cognition being clear.
Yes.
So we need the cognitive frontal lobe situation to be the driver. That is not what's happening in that moment. So if I just open an email and it's slamming me for not doing enough for students with disabilities, which is not, this is a vague example. That's not the moment. So I need to be able to, evaluate, and I can't evaluate with that. So the next thing is, I would say write down what you wanted to send, but don't put it in electronic form and accidentally hit send or something. Write it down. People have pens and there's paper you could use. So write that out. I would say wait 24 hours because you need your system to calm down and you to sleep. And then reread it, but with a lens of critical questions, which is, what emotions am I seeing in this writing? What fear do I see coming through? Are those legitimate fears? Like, does this person even need a response? Who is this person to me? Am I giving this person too much of my life force and time and energy? Even if I never talk to them, I'm giving them my time by even thinking about any of this, right?
Yeah.
Is this someone I know? Is this a stranger? Is it someone who we had a relationship and maybe that there could be a conversation? Or is it more, someone I know to do these kinds of things in a pattern across humans, and maybe that's not something I want to pursue. Are you if you reread what you wrote down, do you have apologizing in there? Are you going to apologize to an abuser? You need to think about that. Are you thanking them for doing something toxic? Sometimes we do that. And do you really want to do that? And if it's something you are okay with doing, that's different, but in a calm cognitive function at its highest, that decision is okay. But just think about what that means. Are you putting your power in the hands of someone who isn't being compassionate and isn't being supportive and isn't about your growth necessarily? Is it that you want people to like you, and so you're trying to figure out a way to manage? Well, surely I can convince them that I'm good. I'm a good one. I'm a good. So is it that, and is that really something you want to, be worrying about? And, are you going to validate and empower bullying behavior, however you respond, if you do? And again, you're not obligated to respond. There's no one is requiring, unless this is like a superior that says you have to reply to me in an economic context. You really don't have to do that. So think about that. And then the last thing I'll say is connect back to your basics. So if you're the kind of person that writes out a vision board or literally types out your goal or has a poster of that or just has it in a Google Doc somewhere, go back to it. What are your values? Know who you are and be able to stand in that, because there will be times you need to go back to that because other people maybe are kind of trying to knock you off balance. Okay.
Yeah, those are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And I would sort of pull out of there, know your trigger buttons. If you are so tied to a certain identity, like your reputation, and someone questions that very identity and reputation, that is going to be your trigger button. So you better be slowing down enough to really think about that, to know. And then the other that I'm pulling out is, I often think to myself, what would I want in a leader? And how do I show up in that way? Like, pull the thing out of me that I want to be seeing, and that I want to be giving out, instead of like my worst, pieces of me. And if I can't offer that, I've got to take a break until I can say, something that is more role model-y than what I really want to start out
with. Even if it has to be aspirational, it's okay.
Right. Now, Kim, we only have a few minutes left. In 1 minute, what might be just a couple of things to think about, practices to put in place for a calling in a compassionate, supportive, empowered way?
Yes. Okay. Well, we kind of touched on this earlier, and it would be really thinking about the relationship. I would say that's first. Is this person why should this person listen to you? Because really you are asking for behavior change, or you're not actually doing it for the right reasons. So if you want behavior change, or you want someone to think about their behavior and maybe consider another perspective, what's the relationship you have with them? Why should they listen to you? And how are you going to approach that person with the curious, not judgmental, so that the effectiveness piece can be at the top and not your ego that has to say, like, I know better than other people. And then will you make sure you're framing that where it's not shaming someone, patronizing someone, or condescending to someone? And do you need to do that in front of other people? Are you potentially humiliating someone? Then you need to find another way. Is it always your place to correct every single person?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Excellent. 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 Okay. If you want to find out more, because Kim has like curriculum on this, she's got a group on this, she does this all the time and excellent at it. So you can find her, and I'm showing this for those of you who are watching, Dr. Kim Case, CASE.com. And you can see lots of offers that she has, courses and essays and all kinds of things.
And
so
Mira, I will say, if people want to look at, there's some essays on there on this topic, since the chapter in the book aren't out yet. So if they go to the essays page, they can look at a few essays on this exact topic.
Wow, look at all of these. That's awesome. That's really amazing, what you're contributing to this work. So for audience, what did you take away? And more importantly, what is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Kim? Share it with us on LinkedIn, and we can cheer you on. We can support you. We can offer additional tips and thoughts. Talkradio.nyc is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and then when it is translated into podcasts, we're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon podcasts, all over the place. Please help us increase our visibility, reach, and impact by leaving a review. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, the host of The Hard Skills Show. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Kim Case. It was lovely to have you.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day wherever you're tuning in from, everybody. Bye.